Hi, this week we're going to start working with Google Sheets. Google Sheets is a spreadsheet program, so very similar to Microsoft Excel. You'll find both the concepts and a lot of the skills, the direct things that you do here, to be extremely similar between those programs and other spreadsheets as well. I think people probably have a variety of different levels of experience with this. Some people have very little experience with spreadsheets, and so this might be a little bit more of a challenge, and others it will probably be a pure review. So let's get started. First of all, spreadsheets are made up of rows and columns. The columns are designated by letters of the alphabet and the rows by numbers. So this particular cell that I'm clicking in is cell B3, and you'll see that that's displayed over here. Now I've pre-populated this sheet, and just working around in these sheets we'll go over some very simple functions. The first is I left some notes over here, but this is not really where I want these things. I actually want these words, which represent functions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I actually want them above this first row 1. So if you want to add rows above a particular location, just simply click on the location in the bar at the left, and then right click and say insert row above. Now you'll notice that picked up the formatting, and I don't really want that, so an easy way to get rid of that is just to select any cell, select the format painter, and just drag it across those cells. Okay, and now they all have the same formatting as the cell that I chose. Now, I said I wanted 7 of these, so I'm going to insert a row above. Notice it comes from the format change that I already made, so I don't have to clean up that formatting again. Now, since the last thing I did was insert a row, I can hold down my control key and hit Y, and that will repeat the action. So I'm going to do that a few times. You can see that I have 4 rows up there now. I could just do it 3 more times and get my 7, but I'll show you one other method of inserting rows. And I'm going to highlight these 3 rows. And if I right click, you'll see now it allows me to insert 3 rows because I've selected 3. Okay, so I've got 7. Let me move these up to here. Okay, we'll need those in a minute. The next thing I would like to do is I'm going to move this information up to the top as well. Now it turns out I'm actually going to need another blank row in here. We'll see why later. So I'm just going to click here, and I'm going to right click, and instead of inserting a row, I'm going to insert one column, and I can do it to the left or to the right. So I'll just do it there. Let me do it again. And if I had selected multiple columns, it would work the same way with rows. So in order to delete a row or column, you simply select it. So if it's a row, you click on a number. If it's a column, you click on a letter, and then you right click, and you'll see that you'll have a delete option in there as well. Okay, let's get into functions. Functions in Excel are just formulas that it does automatically for you. There's a lot of power in this because it can do it for thousands, potentially thousands of pieces of information in just a split second. So in order to tell Excel that you want to put in a function or a formula, you simply click in the cell where you want to enter it, and you hit the equal sign. Okay, the equal sign is always necessary as the first character. That's what tells the spreadsheet that something needs to be done with the information. Now you can see this is guessing, and it's auto-populating that it thinks we want to sum row column C, 9, which is right here, through C20. So it took an excellent guess there as far as what we wanted to add up. What I'm going to do instead, though, is I'm going to change this C20. Well, let me type it. A couple of things you can do. You can either accept something that's suggested to you. You can type. I can click and drag to get the range, but I can also just come in here and type a range if I want. And what I'm going to do here is I am going to say C100. Now, what that does is it allows me, let me hit enter, and it gives me a total. it's only going to sum the numbers that it finds. So it's not really what's in 21, 22, 23, 24. There's nothing there, so it's not impacting this number at all. But what this does allow me to do is to add information later and not need to revise that formula. Everything will update automatically. So something to consider. It's one of the reasons that I put these functions at the top, so that I could leave blank space, incorporate that into my formulas, and it just allow me to work more efficiently later. Okay, now notice when I drag down, I'm going to click on it and I'm going to grab the corner and drag down. It's going to copy the formula, but it's going to increment it, meaning that it now says C10 to C101. Well, that means it's going to miss the first row of my data. So in order to keep that from happening, you've got to use something called an absolute reference. Now everything's going to be in column C, so I don't have to worry about that so much. What I do have to worry about, here we go, is that this number 9 does not increment. So what I do is I get right in front of the number 9 and I put a dollar sign. And that's going to lock it in. As a matter of fact, I'm going to get in front of the 100 and I'm going to put a dollar sign as well. So that means that it will stay C100 as a reference throughout the other columns, or as I drag it down. So I'm going to hit enter. And now when I drag it down, you'll notice you're going to get the exact same thing because it's the exact same formula. The cell references did not change because they were made absolute, or they were made partially absolute. The row numbers were made absolute. And so this really isn't a count. This is the same thing as above. This is a sum. But count is another formula, and all it's going to do, okay, it's giving me some instructions, but when I hit enter, it's just going to count up the number of cells within that range, 9 to 100, that contain some form of value. Okay, so they contain a number, and so there's 12 of them. Now, under average, there's several ways. I can drag down these formulas. I can also just copy the cell. I did that with my keyboard. I can do it here. Copy. And I'm going to paste it. And notice when you paste it, this would have incremented if I had not had the dollar signs in there. So it would have adjusted automatically. So you've got to be careful. You've got to watch that. Now average, we know how to do an average. We could say, let's take the sum. I'm going to copy this. And divide it by the count. I'll do a little editing there. And it's going to give me the average. However, there's also a function. You can always write whatever formula you'd like in there, and it'll work just fine. It's just that sometimes there's a convenient alternative. So in this particular case, let me see. I'm going to erase that formula, and I'm going to say average C, get the dollar sign 9 colon C dollar sign 100. So that's going to give me the average of that range. I'll close the parentheses, and there you go. The colon in that formula simply tells it to start at this value and go all the way through this value. And actually, I can do that over the course of different columns. I could have said C9 to H100, and it would have taken all the values in between. That's just how it's written. This particular value is a little awkward because it's got so many trailing decimal places. You can clean that up over here just by clicking this particular button a bunch of times. Now I've reduced it to 2 decimal places. Okay, let me take some, and now I'm going to copy it into median, mode, min, and max, remembering that the formula copied exactly, so these are really all just sums now. And I guess you can guess what you're going to do here. The sum for median is median, or the formula for median is like that. Let's try mode. hitting the enter key. Now you're getting this NA. It says mode cannot produce a result. No value occurs more than once. So there is no mode for this value set, for this data set. Let's see if that formula would work. Here's a 40 and this is 18. What if this was also 40? Oh, there you go. Everything would update automatically, including the mode. Okay, so we're going to look at how to deal with this type of error later, but it's really not a problem. What it's basically telling you is that there is no value that occurs more than once. Okay, minimum and maximum. So here's a min. Smallest value is 1. There it is. And let's get a maximum. Now, you can type these formulas for column D and column E and column F if you want, but let's try clicking on this, and we can either copy it or we can drag that little box over. And notice that it did adjust for column D. We did not make the column letters an absolute reference. If we had wanted to do that, we would have put a $sign in front of the column as well. See, if I put the $sign in front of D, when I go to copy it over here, it remains D. But because C did not have the $sign in front of the letters, it adjusts for the column. So if I drag it all the way across there, I am now getting the sums for each of these columns. And what I want to do, since these formulas have already been completed, and since the column is not locked in with an absolute reference, I'm just going to select all of those and drag them across. And that basically finishes my my calculations for me. You know, if I want to, I can pretty this up. I can put a border around it. That's probably about all that I would do there. Now, we don't have to, we can take these values and we can sum them again. So if I were to come in here, I could say sum, and look at that. It guesses, it wants to sum C1 through I1. Okay, so that looks like it is correct. It's taking from C to I. So I'm just going to accept that by hitting enter. This one, I'm going to do a count. It didn't guess as well as the last one did, so I'm just going to pull across. That makes sense. Everyone has 12 values. If something didn't have a value, if this was blank, notice that's 11. Okay, so it figures it out pretty quickly. Okay, this is average. Now, there are a couple of ways to get average. I could take the average of the averages. I could do this. That's 36.35. But I could also just take the average of the original data set down here. If I select the entire group, that reference, sorry. There you go. It goes from C9 to I20. So from C9 to I20. And of course, I could just, if I wanted to make sure this was set to do future, I could just make it C9 to I100. And that would take any future data that went in there. And you can see, there you go, the average comes up pretty close to the other average, but not identical. I think when I reduce the decimal places, it will. Okay, so same type of thing here. Equals median. Mode, I'm just going to put not NA. Well, no, I'm going to try that a little differently. I'm going to say equals mode, but I'm going to take the mode from down here. So I'm not sure. Probably, it looks like Saturday and Sunday there wasn't a lot of reading going on. These are number of pages read in a day. So we're probably going to come up with a mode of 0. That's the most common number, heavily weighted by the weekends. If I didn't want that, if I thought that was skewing my data, I certainly could just leave out Saturday and Sunday And I think that would put me at G 100. And now I see that among the weekdays, 60 pages is the mode, the one that occurred most frequently. Okay, so it depends on what data you select. For minimum and maximum, I think I will do the same thing. I will just go through Friday, but I'll bump that up to 100 to account for data I might put in there later. Now, if I were to copy this and paste this, remember what's going to happen. It's going to increment. So not something I want to do unless I lock in with my $signs the row reference. Now if I copy it down, it's the exact same formula, and all I need to do is change that from a min to a max. Hit enter, and there we go. Okay. Those are the basics of those mathematical functions. We're going to look at a couple more functions over here for today, and then we're going to give you some practice. So the first thing I want to do is, I've got a first name and a last name here, but I want to create a field that contains both of them. So the way that we do that is with a function called concatenate. And there are two ways to do concatenate. You can say equals concat. Well, you can always choose concatenate, and then I'm going to tell it what to concatenate. So for row 9, it's going to be A9, and if I pick, comma, and if I pick B9, I'm going to find out I have a little bit of a problem, and that's that the name really needs a space in between, and that's fine. I can do that by simply putting a quote, space, quote. Then I can put a comma and concatenate my third piece, which would be B9, and now I'm going to get that nice well-formatted name. I'm going to click on there and drag down, and now I've got everybody's name. Now, if I want to calculate a username, a couple of considerations here. One is my username is going to be the first initial and the last name, and it's going to be lowercase. Okay, so let's get started, see what I can do first. First thing I'm going to say is equals left, and I'm going to say the left part of Rosie, this A9, but this function calls for another piece of information. That's how many characters from the left do you want? And I want 1. I could put in 6, I could put in 9, I could put in anything I want, but I'm saying that I want 1. And it gets me the R that I expected. Okay, this is going to be the first time that we look at using a combination, or nearly the first time we look at using a combination of different functions in a single cell. Now I could put that R, and then I could go to the next cell and I could concatenate it with this, and I could go to the next cell and I could make them lowercase. Let's look at that first. Equals this. I'm going to show you another way to concatenate. A very simple way. It's a little faster than using the concatenate function. You simply say equals, you select your first value, and then you use the ampersand, and you select your second value, and you hit enter, and that is also concatenation. It's a little faster than having to type out concatenate each time. The difference is if you use the concatenate function, you separate as many as you want, but you separate the different selections with commas, where if you're just using the equal sign, you're going to join them with ampersands. Okay, and by the way, that ampersand would work the same way. I could put quote, space, quote, and another ampersand, so I'm now joining M9, a space, and B9, and there you go. Okay, except I don't want that space in there. And then I could go to a third area here, and I could say, well, that's great, but my username is always lowercase. So I'm going to say equals lower, that's the function, and whatever in that cell, and now I've got my username. Now, if you wanted to do that process in several steps like that, that's perfectly okay, especially if you haven't done this before and you're kind of working your way through it. But know that you can do it all together. You can nest formulas. I'm going to take a look at that now. Let's take a look at this this formula here. It says we want the left value of A9, which is the R, but I can just put in my shorthand for concatenate here, and I can pick Casey, and boy, right there, pretty easily, I took my one character from the left of A9 and all of B9, and I'm halfway to my username. And remembering basic order of operations in mathematics, it works the same way. I can just simply wrap that entire quantity inside this lower function. So put the whole thing in parentheses and then type lower in front of it, and I've got my username in one place. Okay, so I don't really need these two. Lastly, I can come over here now and I can say for an email address, I would like to take my username ampersand, and then I'll add in the rest of the email address at myemail.com. We'll pretend that's our domain. Okay, so now I've created the email addresses, providing that they follow this pattern. Now, before we go any further, we've looked at concatenate, and concatenate can be with the word concatenate or with an ampersand. We've looked at the left function. The right function works just exactly the same. It's just taking it from the right side. So if I were to say the right side of Bailey, and I want, in this case, 2 characters, I am going to get the EY. And if I wanted to take the mid is a little more complicated, equals mid. Let's take the mid of Warren, and let's say that I want, it's going to ask me what character to start at, and I'm going to say start at the 3rd character, and then give me 3 characters. So this particular function takes 3 pieces of information. It takes this cell that you want to work on, the starting point, and the length, and you can see that I'm getting the RRE. Now this might not seem very useful. There's some commands we're going to look at in future weeks that we substitute in there instead of using a hard number like 3, and then they become much, much more useful. But left, right, and mid work in a very similar way. Mid just needs an extra piece of information. Same thing, lower, upper, and proper. So let's take this and say upper. If we took upper Bailey, it would just all become capitalized. If we took proper, it's going to capitalize the first letter of each word. So let's just try this. Let's just try hi there, kid. Okay, so we'll just take the proper of M10, and you can see that each word gets capitalized. Not something I've used a whole lot, but that's how it works. It's easy enough to learn. Okay, those are the basic functions. Now, once you have your formula in place, this pattern is going to hold true, A9, B9. If I just drag this down or copy and paste it down, all it's going to do is increment for these rows. Since I don't want to drag them across, because what I'm going to be doing then is I'm going to be changing the columns when I increment. So I don't want to do that since the formulas are different. I'll just take this formula for email here and I'll drag that down. Okay. In your activity, you're going to decide on some kind of form or some kind of information. I collected, and I think I may have failed to say it in the beginning, I collected the number of pages students read each night over the course of 7 days. You can use any kind of data you want. Just check the assignment, because you're going to want to use some amount of these mathematical functions. So you're going to need some numbers, and you're going to use some subset of these functions that really work with strings or words, more than likely. Okay, quick tip here. If you set something up and you want to populate it with random names, the second tab, I threw a little link in here for you, generator, so you can get a first name and a last name. If you wanted other information, you could get it. You can get it multiple settings here, and you tell it how many you want. So I would like, let's say I want 12. Well, if I want 12, I'm going to have to take 15 and delete 2. But they come in this nice table, and the good thing about that is if I select the values in that table and I'm copying them, you can right click and copy, or you can Control C, and you come back to your database, just click in any cell and do a paste, and that information is going to come in for you right away. It's going to save you a little bit of time. The other thing that can save you time is if you're looking for a particular number. So I'm saying pages read, so I figured, maybe one night they didn't read, so that could be a 0. And even the most voracious reader is, a student is not going to read that many pages, so I was generous and set the upper limit at 100. Now, I didn't have to type all of those in there. There's a command called rand, so equals rand, and it really doesn't take any arguments. You can just open and close the parentheses with nothing in them, and it will generate a number between 0 and 1 randomly. So if I copy this down, you'll notice that all those numbers are going to be different. And actually, anytime I make a change, like if I came to this 25 and I made it 27, notice what happens when I hit enter to the random numbers. Okay, every single time something happens on the spreadsheet, they will randomly generate again. Okay, that's can be a useful function, but you would have to do something with this to convert it into whole numbers, maybe multiply them by 100 and then round them, and it's a lot of work. So there's an alternate formula here called rand between. Okay, so no spaces, just rand between. And in this case, it wants the lower limit. So let me just say that my lower limit is going to be 35, comma, and my upper limit is going to be 50. So this is a rather tight range. And I say, okay, and I get a 43. So that's nice. It's right in the range that I wanted. I'm going to copy that formula down. All of these values are within that range. And again, if I change a value or do anything on the spreadsheet, they're going to recalculate every time. Okay, so in order to lock them in where you get some kind of consistency, let's just say that I needed 5 columns worth of data, 2, 3, 4, 5. There, I've copied that formula, and because these were not cell references, they didn't increment. The formula is identical in all places. And now that I've got the information that I want, which I can get pretty quickly, I can simply select it all, copy it, click back in the first cell, but when I go to paste it, go to Paste Special and pick Values Only. And what that will do is it will replace that formula with the actual number. So once you get what you want, you don't have to worry about changing it anymore. These will no longer increment. They're no longer functions or formulas. They are values. Okay, that's about it. If you have any questions, let me know. And I look forward to seeing what you come up with. Oops, before I finish, I want to go back and do one thing I think I forgot, and that's in the reading log itself, we got these nice totals. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, first of all, format to say totals, and then these were overall totals for the data, but we still don't have totals for each individual person. So what might be nice there is at least the sum, how many total pages they read. So let's just say equals the sum of these. And this student read 266. Now I don't have to worry about locking down this formula, because when I drag it down, See, it is going to jump a row. Because I'm dragging it down, the cell references are not going to change. The C and the I here. And so basically in this case it's doing exactly what I want it without locking in any absolute values. Here we go. So now we just have totals for the students. So we could do further information. I mean, if we wanted to, we could say, you know, which student had the maximum value, which had the minimum value, etc. But for now, we can just leave it like this. What I am going to do to get you started is I am simply going to delete anything I created with the formula here, and I'm going to have you fill out the sheet yourself. Here, let me get you a little formatting at least. Okay, so start with an equal sign, and if you start to type the word that's over here or the word that's over here, you're going to get a suggestion, and that suggestion is going to help you figure out, you know, what you have to do. I would advise typing it in a couple of times. If you're very, very familiar with these, then just do it once and drag it across. If this is something that's more new to you and you want to get a better feel for it, manually type the formula a couple of times before you copy and paste or drag down or across to complete the work. I mean, you can get it completed very quickly, but if you're not familiar with how to do it, sometimes, you know, doing it more than once is helpful.